Maya Chen never thought her life would change on a Tuesday night in November. She was 17, just a regular high school senior trying to get through her last year before college. That evening, she'd finished her volunteer shift at the public library where she helped kids with their reading homework twice a week. It was something she actually enjoyed doing, not just padding for college applications like some of her classmates did with their volunteer work. The library closed at 8, and Maya was one of the last to leave. She waved goodbye to Mrs. Patterson, the head librarian, and walked to her car in the parking lot. It was an old Honda Civic that her parents had bought used, nothing fancy, but it was hers and it ran well enough. She tossed her backpack in the passenger seat and started the engine, already thinking about the essay she needed to finish for her college application. The streets were quiet as she drove home. It was a route she'd taken hundreds of times before. Stop signs, traffic lights, residential neighborhoods with houses lit up from inside where families were probably having dinner or watching TV. Everything felt completely normal. She stopped at the stop sign on Maple Street like she always did, counted to 3 in her head like her dad had taught her during driving lessons, then continued forward. That's when she saw the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Maya's heart jumped a little, the way anyone's does when they see police lights even when they haven't done anything wrong. She checked her speedometer. She'd been going 28 in a 30 zone. Her seatbelt was on. Her registration was current. She had no idea why she was being pulled over, but she knew what to do. She'd been through the talk with her parents about how to handle interactions with police. Be respectful. Keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden movements. Stay calm. She pulled over to the curb, put the car in park, and turned off the engine. Her hands went to the top of the steering wheel where the officer could see them clearly. Through her side mirror, she watched a tall figure emerge from the patrol car and walk toward her vehicle. The streetlight caught his badge. Officer Derek Hastings, though she wouldn't learn his name until later that night. He tapped on her window with his flashlight, and Maya rolled it down halfway. "Good evening, officer," she said politely. "Can I ask why you pulled me over?" "License and registration," he said without answering her question. His tone was cold, not the neutral professional voice she'd heard from the school resource officer at her high school. This was different, harder. "Of course," Maya said. "My license is in my wallet and my purse, and my registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now, okay?" She moved slowly, deliberately, grabbing her purse from the passenger seat and pulling out her wallet. She handed him her license, then reached toward the glove compartment. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Hastings barked suddenly, his voice sharp enough to make Maya freeze. "I'm just getting my registration," she said, her voice shaking slightly now. "You asked for it, it's in the glove compartment." "Step out of the vehicle." Maya blinked. "I'm sorry, what? Why?" "Step out of the vehicle. Now." Her mind raced. This didn't make sense. She'd done everything right. She'd been polite. She'd followed every rule her parents had drilled into her head about traffic stops. "Officer, I don't understand. Can you please tell me what I did wrong? Are you refusing to comply with a lawful order?" His hand moved to his belt, and Maya felt real fear for the first time. No, I'm not refusing anything," she said quickly, reaching for the door handle. Her hands were trembling now as she stepped out onto the sidewalk. The November air was cold, and she hadn't grabbed her jacket from the back seat. Hastings told her to turn around and put her hands on the car. Maya did as she was told, feeling completely surreal about the whole situation. This couldn't be happening. She was a straight-A student. She was on the debate team. She volunteered at the library. She'd never even gotten a detention at school. Another patrol car pulled up, lights flashing. Then another. Within minutes, there were 3 police vehicles on the quiet residential street, and neighbors were starting to come out onto their porches to see what was happening. "I'm going to search your vehicle," Hastings announced. "Why?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "What did I do? I stopped at that stop sign. I wasn't speeding. I don't understand what's happening." "You were swerving," he said flatly. "I wasn't swerving, I was driving normally, I just want to go home." Hastings ignored her and went to search her car. Maya stood there on the sidewalk, 3 other officers watching her like she was dangerous, like she was a criminal. One of the neighbors, an elderly woman she recognized from the block, called out asking if everything was okay. An officer told her to go back inside. After what felt like forever, Hastings emerged from her car holding something small. Maya squinted to see what it was. Her mint tin, the little metal container she kept breath mints in because she always had one after lunch at school. "What's this?" he asked, holding it up. "It's mints," Maya said, confused. "Just breath mints. We'll see about that." He opened it, looked inside at the white mints, and then closed it again. "This container is drug paraphernalia." Maya felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "What?" "No, it's not. Those are literally mints from the store. You can check. They're just mints." "Turn around. You're under arrest." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. "For what?" "I didn't do anything." Resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, and possession of drug paraphernalia. "I didn't resist anything. I did everything you told me to do. I didn't assault anyone." Maya's voice was rising now, panic setting in. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Hastings grabbed her arm roughly and twisted it behind her back. The handcuffs were cold and tight on her wrists. Maya started crying, not from pain but from sheer terror and confusion. "Please, I didn't do anything wrong. Please. I just want to call my parents." One of the other officers asked Hastings if he was sure about this. Maya caught the hesitation in his voice, like even he thought this was wrong. But Hastings just said something about how she'd been aggressive and threatening, how she'd lunged at him when he approached the vehicle, how he'd had to defend himself. None of that had happened. Not a single word of it was true. They put Maya in the back of the patrol car. Through the window, she could see neighbors recording on their phones. She could see her little Honda Civic with the door still open. She could see her backpack on the passenger seat with her unfinished college essay inside. The one about overcoming challenges and staying true to yourself. The irony wasn't lost on her, even through the tears. At the police station, they processed her like she'd seen in movies. Fingerprints, photos, personal belongings taken and cataloged. The mint tin was sealed in an evidence bag. Her phone was taken away before she could call her parents. She asked repeatedly for her phone call, and finally, hours later, they let her make one. Her mom answered on the first ring. "Maya, where are you? We've been calling and calling." "Mom," Maya's voice broke. "I'm at the police station. I got arrested. I don't know what happened. I didn't do anything wrong." She could hear her mother's sharp intake of breath, then her father's voice in the background asking what was wrong. Everything became a blur of questions she couldn't answer because she didn't understand any of it herself. They told her she'd be released to her parents in the morning. That night, Maya Chen, honor roll student and library volunteer, slept in a holding cell on a hard bench, wondering how her entire life had just fallen apart in the span of an hour. Maya's parents picked her up from the juvenile detention center at 9 in the morning. Her mother wrapped her in a hug so tight that Maya could barely breathe, and her father's eyes were red like he'd been crying all night. They didn't say much in the car on the way home. What could they say? None of them understood what had happened. By the time they got home, the story was already online. Local news websites had picked it up with headlines that made Maya feel sick to her stomach. Teen arrested after altercation with police officer. Dangerous driver caught with drug paraphernalia. There was her school photo, the one from the yearbook where she was smiling, next to Officer Hastings looking professional in his uniform. The comments section was brutal. People she'd never met were calling her a thug, saying her parents had raised her wrong, claiming this was what happened when kids had no respect for authority. Someone had already made a hashtag, not one supporting her but one calling her a criminal. Maya's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts from classmates, most of them asking if the news was true, some of them just saying wow or I can't believe it. A few friends reached out with genuine concern, but even those messages felt different, careful, like they weren't quite sure what to believe anymore. The worst part came that afternoon when the official police report was released to her parents' lawyer. Maya sat at the kitchen table with her mom and dad while they read through it, watching their faces change from confusion to anger to disbelief. According to Officer Hastings' report, Maya had been swerving across lanes before he pulled her over. He claimed she'd been driving erratically, possibly under the influence. When he approached her vehicle, she'd allegedly screamed profanities at him and refused to comply with his orders. The report stated that she'd lunged toward him aggressively, forcing him to fear for his safety. It said he'd had to physically restrain her when she tried to flee the scene. Every single word was a lie. "This isn't what happened," Maya said, her voice hollow. "None of this is what happened. I was polite. I did everything he told me to do. I never lunged at anyone. I never tried to run. Mom, Dad, you have to believe me." "We believe you, sweetheart," her mother said immediately, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "We know you. We know this isn't true." But knowing the truth and proving it were two different things, as they quickly learned. The public defender assigned to Maya's case was a tired-looking man named Robert Chen, no relation despite sharing her last name. He had 12 other cases he was juggling, and when he met with Maya and her parents, his advice was simple and devastating. "Take the plea deal," he said, not unkindly, but matter-of-factly. "The prosecutor is offering a reduced charge. You'd do community service, maybe some probation, and it would stay on your juvenile record but get sealed when you turn 18. "But she didn't do anything," Maya's father protested. "This officer is lying." "Every word of his report is false," Robert Chen sighed. He'd clearly had this conversation before. "I understand your frustration, but here's the reality. It's your daughter's word against a 12-year veteran police officer with commendations. Juries tend to believe police officers. Fighting this means going to trial, and trials are expensive. We're talking thousands of dollars, maybe tens of thousands, and there's no guarantee you'll win. Actually, the odds are against you. If she loses at trial, the judge could throw the book at her. She could end up with a record that affects her entire future." Maya felt like she was drowning. "So I'm just supposed to say I did something I didn't do? I'm supposed to lie and say I assaulted a police officer?" "I'm telling you the practical reality of the situation," Chen said. "I've seen cases like this before. They don't usually end well for the defendant. I'm trying to help you." That night, Maya's parents sat her down in the living room. Her dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in one day. Her mom's hands wouldn't stop shaking. "We're not taking the plea deal," her father said firmly. "We're going to fight this." "But you heard what he said. It's expensive. You could lose all that money and I could still be convicted." "We don't care about the money," her mother said, though Maya could see the fear in her eyes. They weren't poor, but they weren't rich either. Her dad worked in IT, her mom was a nurse. They had savings, but not unlimited resources. Fighting a court case could wipe them out financially. "You didn't do this," her father continued. "We're not going to let you take the blame for something you didn't do. We're going to find a real lawyer, someone who will actually fight for you." They found Rita Vasquez through a friend of a friend who'd had a discrimination case years ago. Rita had a small office downtown and a reputation for taking on cases that other lawyers thought were unwinnable. When Maya's parents called her, she agreed to meet with them that same week. Rita was in her 50s, with sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything and a no-nonsense way of talking that Maya found strangely comforting. She listened to Maya's story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "Do you believe me?" Maya asked when she'd finished. Rita looked up from her notes. "Yes, I believe you. I've seen this before. Not with Officer Hastings specifically, but I've seen it. Cops who lie on reports. Cops who target certain people. The system protects them, and it's incredibly hard to fight. But not impossible. How much is this going to cost?" Maya's father asked. Rita named a figure that made both of Maya's parents go pale. It was their savings. All of it, probably more. "We'll take out a loan if we have to," her mother said. "We'll mortgage the house." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Rita said. "First, we need to build a case. Maya, I need you to tell me everything again, every single detail you can remember. What time it was, what street you were on, what you were thinking about, what Officer Hastings said, how he said it. Everything." Over the next few days, the situation got worse before it got better. Maya's college acceptance letter came from the state university, the one she'd been so excited about. But there was a problem. The scholarship they'd offered her, the one that would have covered most of her tuition, was being reconsidered pending the outcome of her criminal case. Her debate team coach called and awkwardly explained that she'd have to step down as captain. "Just temporarily," he said, "until things were sorted out." But Maya heard what he wasn't saying. They didn't want the negative attention. They didn't want to be associated with someone who'd been arrested. Friends stopped sitting with her at lunch. Not all of them, but enough that she noticed. The empty chairs around her felt like accusations. Meanwhile, Rita was working. She filed motion after motion requesting evidence, demanding documentation. She asked for the dashcam footage from Officer Hastings' patrol car. The answer came back that there had been a technical malfunction that night. The camera hadn't been recording. How convenient, Rita said dryly when she told Maya and her parents. A malfunction on the one night we need the footage. But then Rita did something that changed everything. She drove out to the neighborhood where Maya had been pulled over. She walked the street, looked at the houses, the businesses on the corner, and she noticed something. A small business at the intersection had security cameras mounted outside. The owner was an older woman who remembered that night. She'd heard the commotion, all the police cars and lights. She'd looked out her window and wondered what was going on. "Do you still have the security footage from that night?" Rita asked. The woman thought about it. "Maybe. We keep recordings for about 6 months before they get recorded over." "What date was it?" Rita told her. The woman disappeared into a back office and came back 20 minutes later with a USB drive. "I think this is it." Rita watched the footage on her laptop right there in the store, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she smiled. "Maya, I think we've got something. The security footage wasn't perfect. It was grainy, shot from a distance, and the angle didn't capture everything. But what it did show was enough to make Maya cry with relief when Rita played it for her and her parents in their living room. There was Maya's car, clear as day, coming to a complete stop at the stop sign. Not a rolling stop, not a quick pause, but a full proper stop. The timestamp showed she'd waited for 3 seconds before proceeding. The car moved forward in a straight line, no swerving, no erratic driving. Just a normal person driving normally on a quiet street. Then Officer Hastings' patrol car appeared from a side street. He came from the opposite direction, turned onto the road behind Maya, and immediately activated his lights. There was no way he could have been following her for any length of time. He literally just turned onto that street seconds before pulling her over. The footage showed Maya pulling over promptly. It showed her sitting in her car, hands visible on the steering wheel. When Hastings approached, the video showed Maya's calm body language through her car window. There was no lunging, no aggressive movement, nothing that could be interpreted as threatening. "This contradicts his entire report," Rita said, pausing the video. "He claimed he observed you swerving from a distance. That's impossible based on this footage. He claimed you were aggressive and combative. This shows the opposite. This is gold, Maya. This is exactly what we needed." But Rita wasn't satisfied with just the footage. She knew that in court, the prosecution would try to minimize it or find ways to explain it away. She needed more. She needed to show a pattern. She hired a private investigator named Carlos, a former cop himself who'd left the force after seeing too much corruption. Carlos started digging into Officer Hastings' history, and what he found was disturbing. Over the past 2 years, Hastings had arrested 17 young people, mostly teenagers and young adults. Of those 17 arrests, 12 had resulted in charges being dropped or significantly reduced due to what the court documents vaguely called evidentiary issues or inconsistencies. In the police report, Carlos compiled a list of names. Rita started making phone calls. Most of the people didn't want to talk. They'd moved on, tried to put it behind them. Some had taken plea deals and didn't want to reopen old wounds, but a few agreed to meet with her. One of them was a 19-year-old named Jordan Ellis. He lived 2 neighborhoods over from Maya and worked at a grocery store while taking classes at community college. When Rita met him at a coffee shop and explained why she was there, Jordan's hands started shaking so badly he had to put down his cup. "Officer Hastings," Jordan said quietly. "Yeah, I remember him. I'll never forget him." Jordan's story was eerily similar to Maya's. He'd been pulled over for allegedly running a red light, though Jordan insisted the light had been yellow. Hastings claimed Jordan had been belligerent and uncooperative. He'd been arrested for resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. Jordan had been so scared, so overwhelmed by the system, that he'd taken a plea deal. He did 40 hours of community service and paid a fine. The conviction stayed on his record. "I was 17, Jordan said. I didn't know what to do. My family didn't have money for a lawyer. The public defender told me to take the deal, so I did. But I didn't do what they said I did. I was respectful. I did everything right. And it didn't matter. Would you be willing to testify? Rita asked. About what happened to you? Jordan was quiet for a long moment. Will it help her? The girl he arrested? It could make all the difference. Then yes, I'll do it. Nobody else should have to go through what I went through. Rita found two other people willing to talk. One was a 22-year-old woman named Beth, who'd been arrested during a traffic stop where Hastings claimed she'd been driving under the influence. The breathalyzer test had come back negative. The charges were dropped, but not before Beth lost her job because she'd missed work while dealing with the arrest. The other was a 16-year-old boy named David, whose parents had fought the charges against him. They'd spent $15,000 on a lawyer, and the case was dismissed when the judge found significant problems with Hastings's testimony. But the family was financially devastated, and David had panic attacks now whenever he saw a police car. Rita compiled all of this information into a detailed brief. She documented the pattern. 12 arrests over 2 years with similar circumstances. Young people. Traffic stops that escalated unnecessarily. Claims of aggression that couldn't be verified. Evidence that mysteriously disappeared or malfunctioned. She filed a motion to introduce evidence of Officer Hastings' history of questionable arrests. The prosecution fought back hard, arguing that past incidents weren't relevant to Maya's case. But Rita argued that it showed a pattern of behavior, a modus operandi that went directly to Hastings's credibility as a witness. The judge ruled that Rita could introduce limited evidence of the pattern at trial. Meanwhile, Maya's life continued to fall apart around her. Her senior year, which should have been exciting and full of possibilities, felt like she was walking through a nightmare. The college scholarship was officially revoked. The university said she could still attend, but without the financial aid, her family couldn't afford it. One afternoon, Maya came home from school to find her mother crying at the kitchen table. Maya's heart sank. What happened? Nothing new, her mom said, trying to wipe her tears away. I'm just scared. What if we lose? What if we spend all this money and fight this case and you still end up with a conviction? What if we destroy our finances and it doesn't make a difference? Maya sat down next to her mother and took her hand. Then at least we fought. At least we didn't just accept his lies. I'd rather try and fail than not try at all. But late at night, alone in her room, Maya wasn't always so brave. She'd lie awake thinking about all the what-ifs. What if the jury believed Hastings instead of her? What if they thought she was lying? What if the security footage wasn't enough? What if her entire future was destroyed because one cop decided to lie? She started having nightmares about the arrest, about the handcuffs, about sitting in that cell. She'd wake up sweating, her heart racing. Her grades started slipping. Not dramatically, but enough that her teachers noticed. Ms. Rodriguez, her English teacher, pulled her aside one day after class. Maya, I know what you're going through is difficult, but you can't let this destroy everything you've worked for. You're one of the brightest students I've ever taught. Don't give up on yourself. I'm trying, Maya said. It's just hard to focus when my whole life is falling apart. Then use that, Ms. Rodriguez said. Use that anger, that frustration, that sense of injustice. Channel it into something. Write about it. Document everything. Your voice matters, Maya. Don't let anyone silence it. That night, Maya started writing. Not her college essay, but a detailed account of everything that had happened. Every moment of that traffic stop. Every word Hastings had said, every feeling she'd experienced. She wrote about the fear, the confusion, the helplessness of being accused of something she didn't do. She wrote about the system that seemed designed to protect the person with the badge rather than find the truth. She wrote about Jordan and Beth and David, about all the other people Hastings had lied about. She wrote about how the justice system wasn't always just. When she was done, she had 30 pages. She saved it on her computer, backed it up on a cloud drive, and printed out a copy. This was her truth in her own words, and nobody could take that away from her. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks before Maya's 18th birthday. Rita prepared her for what to expect. The courtroom, the judge, the prosecution, they practiced testimony, went over questions that might be asked, discussed how to stay calm under pressure. Remember, Rita told her, they're going to try to make you seem unreliable or emotional. They'll try to paint you as a troubled teen. Stay calm. Stick to the facts and tell the truth. That's all you can do. What if the truth isn't enough? Maya asked. Rita looked at her seriously. Then we make it enough. We make them see you for who you really are. Not a criminal, not a troublemaker, but a kid who got caught up in one cop's pattern of abuse. We make them see that. The night before the hearing, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about walking into that courtroom, facing Officer Hastings again, having to relive that night in front of strangers. But she also thought about Jordan and Beth and David. She thought about all the people who'd taken plea deals because they were too scared to fight. She made a decision that night. No matter what happened, she wasn't going to be silent. She was going to tell her truth loud and clear and make them listen. The courtroom was more crowded than Maya expected. She'd imagined a small, quiet room with just the judge, lawyers, and maybe her parents. Instead, the gallery was packed. Local reporters filled the back rows, notebooks ready. Her story had gotten attention online, and supporters had started showing up. They wore purple ribbons, which had somehow become a symbol of her case. Maya didn't even know how that started, but the police were there too. At least a dozen officers in uniform sat directly behind the prosecutor's table in a show of solidarity with Officer Hastings. Their presence felt like a wall, like a reminder of the power she was up against. Maya sat at the defense table next to Rita, trying to keep her hands from shaking. Her parents were right behind her in the front row. Her mom reached forward and squeezed her shoulder. When Officer Hastings walked in, wearing his crisp uniform with all his badges and commendations displayed, the room felt smaller. He looked confident, comfortable. This was his territory, his world. He nodded to his fellow officers and sat down next to the prosecutor, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Dawson, who had a reputation for never losing cases. The judge entered, and everyone stood. Judge Williams was an older black man with gray hair and reading glasses that he wore on a chain around his neck. He had a reputation for being fair but tough. Rita had told Maya that was a good thing. We're here today for the preliminary hearing in the case of the state versus Maya Chen, Judge Williams said. Ms. Dawson, you may call your first witness. The state calls Officer Derek Hastings. Hastings walked to the witness stand with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times before. He was sworn in, and then Patricia Dawson began asking him questions. His testimony was smooth, practiced. He described pulling over a vehicle that had been swerving erratically. He described approaching the vehicle and encountering a hostile, belligerent teenager who refused to comply with his orders. He talked about fearing for his safety when Maya allegedly lunged toward him. His voice never wavered. He maintained eye contact with the jury. He looked every bit the professional officer protecting the community. Maya felt sick listening to him turn that night into something unrecognizable. She wanted to stand up and shout that he was lying, but Rita had warned her. Stay calm. Let the evidence speak. When Patricia Dawson finished, Rita stood up for cross-examination. The energy in the courtroom shifted. Rita approached the witness stand with a tablet in her hand. Officer Hastings, you stated in your report that you observed Ms. Chen swerving erratically before you initiated the traffic stop, is that correct? Yes, that's correct. And that dangerous driving was your reason for pulling her over? Yes, ma'am. Rita pulled up something on her tablet. Can you tell the court exactly where you were when you first observed this alleged swerving? Hastings paused just for a second. I was patrolling the area. More specifically, officer, according to your patrol log, which street were you on? I'd have to check my notes. Allow me to help. According to your own patrol log, at the time of the stop you were on Birch Street, which runs parallel to Maple Street where Ms. Chen was driving. Is that accurate? If that's what the log says. Rita pulled up an image on her tablet and displayed it on the courtroom monitors. It was a map of the intersection. Birch Street and Maple Street are parallel, separated by a full block of houses. There's no line of sight between these streets. So how exactly did you observe Ms. Chen's vehicle swerving when you were on a completely different street? Hastings shifted in his seat. I turned onto Maple and observed her at that point. According to your patrol log, you turned onto Maple Street at 8:47 p.m. You activated your lights to initiate the stop at 8:47 p.m. That's the same minute, officer. Are you telling this court that in the span of seconds you observed enough erratic driving to justify a traffic stop? I know what I saw. Let me show you what the security camera saw. Rita pulled up the surveillance footage on the monitors. The courtroom went quiet as everyone watched. Maya's car driving normally, coming to a complete stop, proceeding forward in a straight line, Hastings' patrol car appearing from the side street and immediately lighting her up. Officer Hastings, does this look like erratic, dangerous driving to you? The camera angle doesn't show everything. It shows Ms. Chen coming to a complete stop at the stop sign. It shows her driving in a straight line. It shows your patrol car turning onto her street just seconds before you pulled her over. It shows, Officer Hastings, that your claim about observing extended erratic driving is impossible based on the timeline and your own patrol log. Patricia Dawson objected, saying Rita was arguing rather than questioning. But the damage was done. The jury had seen the video. They'd seen the contradiction. Rita continued. You also stated in your report that Ms. Chen was hostile and combative when you approached her vehicle. Can you describe exactly what she said and did? Hastings recounted his version, the screaming, the profanity, the alleged lunging. And yet, Rita said, the security footage, while distant, shows Ms. Chen sitting in her vehicle with her hands visible on the steering wheel. It shows calm body language. It shows none of this alleged aggression you've described. The camera was too far away to capture everything. Convenient. Just like how your dash cam mysteriously malfunctioned that night. In fact, Officer Hastings, isn't it true that your dash cam has had quite a few technical malfunctions, specifically during traffic stops that later resulted in charges being dropped? Patricia Dawson objected loudly. Judge Williams sustained it, but again the seed was planted. Rita changed direction. Officer Hastings, are you familiar with a man named Jordan Ellis? Hastings hesitated. I may have encountered him during my duties. You arrested him 2 years ago under circumstances remarkably similar to Ms. Chen's arrest. Aren't you aware that Mr. Ellis is willing to testify that you falsified information in his case as well? The objections came fast and furious from the prosecution, but Rita had made her point. She had more. Beth's name came up. David's name. Each time Hastings grew more uncomfortable, his answers less certain. How many young people have you arrested in the past 2 years, Officer Hastings? I don't have an exact number. 17, according to department records. And of those 17 arrests, how many resulted in charges being dropped or reduced due to problems with evidence or inconsistencies in your reports? I don't know the exact number. 12 out of 17. That's a 70% failure rate, officer. Does that seem unusual to you? Each case is different. Or perhaps, Rita said, each lie is different. Perhaps you've developed a pattern of fabricating evidence and false charges against young people who you assume won't have the resources or courage to fight back. The objection was immediate and sustained. And Judge Williams warned Rita about her line of questioning. But Rita just smiled slightly and said, no further questions. When Hastings stepped down from the witness stand, he didn't look quite as confident as when he'd stepped up. The jury watched him walk back to his seat, and Maya could see some of them exchanging glances. The prosecution called a few more witnesses, other officers who'd been at the scene. But their testimonies were vague, second-hand accounts based on what Hastings had told them. None of them had actually witnessed Maya doing anything wrong. Then it was the defense's turn. Rita called the woman who owned the business with the security camera. She testified about what she'd seen that night. How surprised she'd been by the heavy police response to what looked like a routine traffic stop. Rita called a forensic expert who testified that the mint tin contained no traces of any controlled substances, that it was literally just a container of breath mints from a convenience store. She called Maya's English teacher, who talked about what kind of student Maya was. She called the head librarian from the place where Maya volunteered. Character witness after character witness painted a picture of a responsible, respectful teenager who'd never been in any kind of trouble. And then Rita called Jordan Ellis to the stand. Jordan was nervous, his voice shaking as he was sworn in. But when Rita asked him to tell the court about his experience with Officer Hastings, Jordan found his courage. He described his arrest in detail, the false accusations, the lies in the police report, the fear he'd felt, the pressure to take a plea deal. And then he said something that made several jury members sit up straighter. I took the plea deal because I was scared and I didn't know what else to do, but it's haunted me ever since. I did nothing wrong and I let them make me say I did. When I heard about Maya's case, about what Officer Hastings was doing to her, I knew I had to speak up. Because if I don't, how many more kids is he going to do this to? The courtroom was silent when Jordan finished. Even the officers behind the prosecution table looked uncomfortable. Rita rested her case. Judge Williams called for a 30-minute recess before closing arguments. During the recess, Maya stood in the hallway outside the courtroom with her parents. Her legs felt weak and she leaned against the wall for support. Rita was somewhere making phone calls, preparing her closing argument. Jordan stood a little ways away, looking exhausted but also somehow lighter, like telling his story had lifted a weight off his shoulders. "You okay?" Maya's dad asked, putting his hand on her shoulder. "I don't know," Maya admitted. "What if it's not enough? What if they still believe him?" "Then we appeal," her mother said firmly. "We keep fighting." "But Maya, you heard what happened in there. You saw how Rita broke down his story." The jury saw it too. When they went back inside, Maya noticed something had changed. The officers who'd been sitting behind the prosecution table, so solid and united before, looked less certain now. A few were whispering to each other. One had left entirely. Judge Williams took his seat. "Closing arguments, Ms. Dawson, you may proceed." The prosecutor stood and approached the jury. She was good at her job, Maya had to admit. She talked about the importance of respecting law enforcement, about the split-second decisions officers had to make, about how difficult and dangerous their jobs were. She suggested that the security footage didn't tell the whole story, that there were angles and moments the camera couldn't capture. But her argument felt weaker now, less certain than it would have if Rita hadn't systematically dismantled Hastings's credibility. Patricia Dawson was trying to rebuild a house that had already been torn down to its foundation. Then it was Rita's turn. She stood and looked at the jury for a long moment before speaking. When she did, her voice was clear and strong. "This case is not about disrespecting law enforcement. Good officers, honest officers, do one of the hardest jobs in our society, and we should support them. But this case is about holding accountable an officer who has violated the trust that badge represents. Officer Hastings didn't make a split-second decision that night. He made a calculated choice to lie." Rita walked them through the evidence piece by piece. The surveillance footage that contradicted his claims about erratic driving. The timeline that made his story impossible. The pattern of dropped charges and dismissed cases. Jordan's testimony about experiencing the exact same false accusations. Maya Chen is not a criminal. She's a 17-year-old honor student who volunteers at the library teaching children to read. She's a daughter, a friend, a young woman with dreams of going to college. And in one night, Officer Hastings tried to destroy all of that with lies. Rita paused, letting that sink in. The prosecution wants you to believe that everyone is lying except Officer Hastings. That the security camera is lying. That Maya is lying. That Jordan Ellis is lying. That the forensic evidence is lying. That's a lot of lies from a lot of different sources, all perfectly coordinated to frame one police officer. Or perhaps the simpler explanation is true. Perhaps one man lied and everyone else is telling the truth. She walked back to the defense table and stood next to Maya. "Before you deliberate, I'd like Maya to address the court directly. With the judge's permission." Judge Williams looked surprised but nodded. "Ms. Chen, you may approach the witness stand." Maya's heart hammered as she walked to the stand. This wasn't planned. Rita had asked her last night if she wanted to say something, and Maya had said yes, but she hadn't been sure it would actually happen. Her hands were shaking as she was sworn in. Rita didn't ask her questions. Instead, she just said, "Maya, would you like to tell the jury what happened that night and what this experience has meant to you?" Maya looked out at the courtroom, at the jury, at her parents, at Jordan, who gave her an encouraging nod, at Officer Hastings, who wouldn't meet her eyes. She took a deep breath. "That night I was thinking about my future. I'd just finished volunteering at the library, and I was heading home to work on my college essay. I had my whole life ahead of me, you know? I was 17 and excited about what came next. And then I saw those lights in my rearview mirror and everything changed." Her voice was steady, stronger than she'd expected. "I did everything right. I was polite. I was respectful. I kept my hands visible. I followed every instruction. And it didn't matter. Officer Hastings decided to lie about me, and suddenly I was a criminal. My face was on the news. People I'd never met were calling me a thug. My scholarship was revoked. Friends stopped talking to me, all because one person with a badge decided the truth didn't matter." She looked directly at the jury now. "I've learned something these past months. Having the truth on your side isn't always enough. The system is designed to believe people like Officer Hastings over people like me, and that would be the end of the story for most people. They'd take a plea deal because fighting is too expensive, too scary, too hard. They'd accept being labeled a criminal even though they did nothing wrong. Maya pulled out the notebook she'd brought with her, the one she'd written in the night she was released from detention. But I refused to let that be my story. The night I was arrested after I got released the next morning, I wrote down everything that happened while it was still fresh in my mind. Every detail. Every word Officer Hastings said. Every action I took. I documented it at 2:47 in the morning because somewhere inside me, I knew I'd need to prove the truth. She held up the notebook. This is time-stamped. I wrote this 6 hours after the arrest, long before Officer Hastings filed his official report the next day. And every word in here contradicts his lies. I didn't know about the security footage yet. I didn't know my parents would find a lawyer like Rita. I just knew that my truth mattered and I needed to preserve it. Rita approached with a surprised look. They hadn't discussed the notebook. Maya had kept it private, too personal to share. But now in this moment it felt like the right time. I'd like to submit this as evidence, Rita said to Judge Williams. The prosecutor objected, but the judge overruled it. The notebook was entered into evidence and Maya continued. This case isn't just about me. It's about Jordan, who took a plea deal because he was too scared to fight. It's about everyone else Officer Hastings lied about. It's about the next kid he would have done this to if nobody stopped him. Maya's voice got stronger. Officer Hastings didn't just try to ruin my future that night. He tried to steal my truth. And I won't let that happen. Not to me and not to anyone else. The courtroom was completely silent. Maya could see one of the jury members wiping her eyes. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm just asking for the truth to matter. I'm asking you to look at the evidence, really look at it, and ask yourselves who's telling the truth. A 17-year-old girl with everything to lose or an officer with a history of charges that don't stick and reports that don't match reality. Maya stepped down from the witness stand, her legs shaking but her head held high. She walked back to the defense table and sat down next to Rita, who squeezed her hand. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Maya spent those hours in a small room with her parents, unable to eat the sandwiches someone had brought, unable to do anything but wait. Jordan came by to check on her. Whatever happens, he said, you were brave. You spoke up when I couldn't. Thank you for that. When the bailiff came to tell them the jury had reached a verdict, Maya thought she might throw up. The walk back into the courtroom felt like walking through water, everything slow and surreal. The jury filed back in. The forewoman stood. Judge Williams asked if they'd reached a verdict. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of resisting arrest, how do you find? Not guilty, Maya's mother gasped behind her. On the charge of assaulting an officer, how do you find? Not guilty. On the charge of possession of drug paraphernalia, how do you find? Not guilty, the courtroom erupted. People were crying, applauding. The judge had to call for order. Maya sat frozen, unable to quite believe it was real. Not guilty. Not guilty. Not guilty. Her parents wrapped their arms around her. Rita was smiling, actually smiling, which Maya had rarely seen. Jordan was crying in the back of the courtroom, this time with relief. But Maya wasn't done. She stood up and the courtroom quieted. Judge Williams looked at her curiously. Your Honor, may I say one more thing? He nodded. Maya turned to face the courtroom, face Officer Hastings one last time. This verdict is just the beginning. Officer Hastings needs to be investigated properly. Jordan Ellis's conviction needs to be overturned. And everyone else he lied about deserves justice too. The system that protects officers who lie needs to change. I'm going to make sure it does. 3 months later, Officer Derek Hastings was fired following an internal investigation. The pattern Rita had documented couldn't be ignored anymore. Jordan's conviction was vacated. The city implemented new policies requiring body cameras for all officers with no exceptions, and a civilian oversight board was established to review complaints against police. Maya's scholarship was reinstated, and she got accepted to an even better university with a full ride. Her essay topic was titled Speaking Truth to Power When Power Doesn't Want to Listen. On her first day of college, moving into her dorm room, Maya hung a photo on her wall. It was from the day of the verdict, her standing on the courthouse steps with her parents, Rita and Jordan. She was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. Under the photo, she'd written a quote she'd come up with during those dark nights of waiting for trial. They can try to change my story, but they cannot change who I am. And she'd kept that promise to herself. Officer Hastings had tried to turn her into something she wasn't. The system had tried to make her just another statistic. But Maya Chen had fought back with the truth, and the truth had won. Not because the system worked perfectly, not because justice was automatic, but because she refused to stay silent, refused to accept lies, and refused to let anyone steal her voice. And that made all the difference.